Hi, and welcome to the first episode of the Coevolve podcast. I'm Ciaran Roche, co-founder and CTO of Coevolve, and I'm joined today by Tim Sullivan, my co-founder partner based in Sydney. Tim, how are you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good, mate. Looking forward to this chat today and sharing a bit more on our story and our background. So looking forward to it.
Excellent. Likewise, it's been a long time coming. I feel like we've told bits and pieces of the story from time to time, but kind of wrapping up the unusual year we've had here in 2020, we felt it was a good opportunity to rewind a little bit and go back and look at some of the original reasons and ideas why we started Coevolve in the first place, and then talk a bit more about what we're doing today, why we feel it's helpful for the clients we work with, and then finally look forward to the future then a little bit as well. So, I mean, thinking about where we are now, it's hard to believe that it was about 6.5 years ago when we started the business. And I don't know about you, it feels like that time has both gone by very quickly, but also if I try to remember back to those early days, it seems like a long time ago, right?
Oh, mate, ages ago. I remember this very week in 2014, we were together with Sadir as well in Chicago. A little bit chillier than it is here in Sydney today. So, yeah, that time's flown by.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're heading right into winter here in Chicago, so that part hasn't changed at the very least. Yeah. No, but I think what's interesting to me is if we look back to some of the original ideas, and certainly how I saw it at the time, the whole philosophy behind Coevolve was that we could see a lot of change and a lot of interesting things starting to happen in the enterprise networking technology space. And what it looked like was that there was a lot of money and a lot of investment going into product companies, but not a whole lot of focus going into the services across the top of it. And I think that was probably the origin of Coevolve, was the idea that we could build a business that could be that bridge between the old and the new for these enterprises. So we could come in and we could understand the technology, but we could also understand the business side of things as well. We knew these enterprise networks, we knew the challenges they faced, the baggage that they came with and that they carried with them, and to try to build very much a services focused business from the very beginning. And if I look back to some of those origins, I think there's a lot that we couldn't have predicted would happen. And when we built our first business plan back then, there was no line item for SD-WAN or cloud networking. But there's actually a lot that I think is still very similar and has carried on through the days of Coevolve there as we've built the business. And there's still very much that service focus around what we do today for our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the original kernel of the idea for the business was that we could see these software-defined networking options were coming. As you say, SD-WAN wasn't even actually an industry term when we did that first business case. But we knew that there were some interesting companies emerging, and those options were much more simple to deploy and much more powerful, but they weren't coming from the incumbents. We knew that typically the big incumbent players with their legacy technologies weren't going to be the ones pushing the envelope and bringing the new technologies out to the market initially. But there'd be a whole raft of new players. And sure enough, that initial number that we were tracking when we did that first business case together started to mushroom, didn't it, in 2014?
That's true.
And, almost month by month, there was another new name popping up: CloudGenix, VelaCloud, Viptela, in addition to the ones that we were already tracking, like Fat Pipes and Glue Networks and Ariaka and others. So we knew that absolutely the innovation was coming, and the promise of a simplification for these global wide area networks was coming. We knew that the incumbents weren't going to make that easy for enterprises to adopt. We knew that there would be an amount of work to be done to really dissect these new options, figure out which of the ones could really be trusted, strip away some of that marketing wear, and really get under the skin of it and really practically advise the clients basically about not just the technical possibilities, but also what the commercial case looked like, what the operating model needed to look like for the new technology. So that was really the genesis of the business, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think what was interesting then was that with a lot of these new technologies, there were not a lot of reliable proof points out there in the industry. If you were a multinational enterprise that was interested in some of these early versions of SD-WAN, you couldn't go and find 10 peer companies out there that could vouch for it and show that it would work well. So I found at the time a lot of the work fell to us to really walk the clients through that and think back to some of the early proof of concepts we did in Southeast Asia and Vietnam and some of those, tricky markets. We certainly didn't pick easy countries to start with some of those, but in a way, I almost think it gave us a bit of a head start from a credibility perspective, because we were able to prove it in some of the really challenging environments first, as opposed to trying to do the basics and then take it step by step from there. And the clients then were able to see the benefits really quickly, because they're the markets in many cases where they were kind of crying out for that type of step change in technology and performance and cost as well. So I thought that was interesting at the time to see how we were able to maybe leapfrog some of the steps that would traditionally have been involved in bringing some of these technologies out to the enterprise.
Yeah, I think that's right. We were always very conscious and respectful that different clients have a different life cycle that they're working to. Some of these enterprises are more risk averse. They don't want to be an early adopter. Not everyone can be an early adopter by definition, right? Sure. So, we need to be very conscious and respectful of where the client is in that cycle, what incumbent relationships they've got in place, and incumbent investments they're yet to fully maximise. And as you say, in the early days, there was an awful lot of education. We sort of joked that the business model in the first year or two was a sort of a non-fee paying university, didn't we? That we were providing a lot of advice and education to those enterprise conversations. But we were learning, on the fly as well, weren't we? And as you say, we've always sort of had that global mindset. So we've always really been fascinated by, not just one market, but really, the global market and all the nuances between how different they are, region to region, country to country even. So I think, as you say, choosing not to just do local deployments, but seeing that early technology experience with really valued early adopter clients in a whole raft of countries, even by 2015, second year of operation, we were working across 10 to 15 different countries, just as the very first SD-WAN multinational deployments anywhere, I think. So it really is a combination of the global mindset and sort of really establishing our business in 2014 as born global, set up in multiple countries immediately, and marrying that global mindset with, this new technology that we're helping our clients adopt.
Absolutely. And if I think back, some of the challenges we had then were pretty unique ones, because in many cases we were deploying the technology over the top of ISP networks where there was never any SD-WAN networks deployed on them before. I remember some of the ISPs in Asia, for example, started blocking and limiting the SD-WAN traffic because the way the tunnels were set up, it looked like it was some sort of a DDoS attack or something unusual on the network initially. And they were kind of pre-programmed to detect that and try to stamp out those traffic patterns. So we were finding things that literally the first in the industry in many cases to find them, because we were taking technology that was starting to gain some momentum and some traction in maybe North America and Western Europe, but taking it out to the really difficult markets where it just wasn't being done by any other service providers or any other businesses like that at the time. So we learned through some of the sort of tricky experience along the way there with the issues and so on that we came up with, didn't we?
Absolutely. I think you raise a good point there, mate, that we always sort of had an ecosystem mentality. So yes, the vendor technology from these new emerging players like VelaCloud was fantastic, but you needed to understand the circuit, and those ISP issues. And as you say, they weren't familiar at all with what was going on in some of these, California startups that were creating a brand new way of doing the wide area network. So we had to be quite conscious of the adjacencies, didn't we? And sort of think through those circuit underlay issues to make that overlay work really well, to think of the security issues and other adjacent requirements that our clients had. So even if we didn't have contractual responsibility for some of those relationships, inevitably we just had to weigh in, and we've got a wonderful team and have built up an amazing team who just have that attitude to sort of go, okay, I am going to extend across the aisle and help out here, because if we're going to get an outcome here for everybody, we do need to sort of sometimes go the extra mile, don't you?
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think if I look at the transition that we made as a business, so we started out in some of those early days, kind of the Wild West in some of the technology deployments and really learning as we went along. But we established some credibility pretty quickly. We did some of those early trials and POCs and so on. But I think what dominated those early days of Coevolve was that we became seen as a credible, I almost hesitate to use the phrase industry expert, but we had collected a lot of knowledge about technology from a lot of different vendors and became seen as a kind of go-to group within the enterprise community to say, if we're looking at an assessment, we might be looking at adopting this technology. We maybe think there could be a business case. Can you help us do it? So a lot of those early days were around doing those consulting projects and overseeing it and applying that level of expertise, and often a level of critique against what the vendors were saying, where they'd come in and say, yes, we can do all these different changes in your environment. Very often we were the ones kind of putting our hands up and saying, well, it doesn't really work like that. It actually works this way. And I think that always struck me that especially when we were working with quite a number of startups on the vendor side, we made a mark, I think, pretty early as being the ones where we could actually challenge the SEs and the technical teams on the vendor side. And the clients respected that. The clients would pay consulting fees for that because they knew that we were adding value over the top of what the vendors were and could kind of sanity check what they were getting. So, those consulting type scopes really dominated those early days of Coevolve. And I think what was most interesting for me was how we started to make the transition from that type of work into the business that we are today. So moving more away from project-based consulting and professional services work into more of an ongoing managed services and co-managed services space. And what I think has become very apparent was that a lot of that work came, and those ongoing services were almost a byproduct of some of those consulting scopes that we did. We would come in and we would do an assessment and we'd say, yeah, there's a great business case here for this technology. Very often the client would then turn to us and say, well, we don't have anyone else to implement this and to run it for us. Is that something that you can provide as well? And I think as we started to ease into that, that really started to change the balance of the business and to change the whole model around how we operate. Is that how you'd see it as well? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny, you write these business cases like literally when it was just you and I, we didn't even have the company logo, right?
Yeah.
And we said, in the first year, it'll be 20% recurring services, 80%, as you say, those professional services, that consulting type work. But by year 3, that will be flipped on its head, and it'll be 20% professional services and 80% recurring managed services, or integrated solutions, as we call it now. And funnily enough, it's pretty much how it panned out. I'm not saying for a second that everything panned out exactly as we planned. You learn a lot along the way. And I think that's the other key point that you make there, mate, that, it was a very collaborative experience, not just with the vendors, and there's some wonderful relationships that we have and have had since 2014-15 with those vendors, but with the clients as well. So early adopter clients, I think of someone like a David Stork at Detmold. We learned a lot together, and his questions and views and suggestions were really helpful. And, and really that's the essence of Coevolve, isn't it? If it is good business for our client and it's good business for our company, then absolutely, it will evolve together. We know that the technology doesn't stand still. That's the fundamental premise. That's pretty obvious, really. The technology cycle keeps getting shorter, in fact. But so long as it's good business with our client, then, we keep co-evolving it. So, that's really the name of the business, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Yeah. And if we take that then back to where we are today, I think if you look at the services we provide today, as you mentioned the phrase integrated solutions there, that really describes quite well, I think, what we do as a business today. So a big part of what we do has become built around managed services and co-managed services across SD-WAN as a technology. And then more recently, we've started to see some of the cloud networking and multi-cloud opportunities arise as well, just as our clients start to naturally move more into that space as well. But I think what's notable in how we've defined the managed services is, I think, two things that I would describe about the SD-WAN service in particular. So first, we've taken this telco independent approach, and that's still a bit of an unusual aspect of the service in the industry where a lot of the big players in the industry are telcos, and it's a very telco-centric industry. A lot of enterprises still buy their enterprise networks from telcos. And I think the fact that we've built a business that is sort of deliberately not aligned with telcos and can be built over the top of anyone's underlay is a significant thing in itself. And I think that kind of goes back to some of our long history working together even before Coevolve. We always had a very sort of arm's length relationship with a lot of the telcos so that we could deliver valuable services across the top and not be beholden to the technology and the lock-in that was in some of those networks. So it's interesting in a way to see some of that DNA almost carried forward into what we do today as a business, isn't it?
100%. That's what we loved about the technology, I think, is that it was actually, that pendulum was swinging back towards the client, and the client was getting more power and more control of their own destiny. They would need specialist parties to help them with that. But whereas they'd been sort of locked out of the wide area network control a little bit too much, and those networks were too rigid and too inflexible, that really the enterprise owners of these networks were crying out for more power in the relationship, more control. So really that's what the technology was enabling. And you really needed to then put the right operating model around that in addition to enabling and educating on the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of leads us to the co-managed piece of what we do today. And again, I think we've started to see that term creep into the industry a little bit in the last year. But I think what's notable there is that we've been providing these co-managed services really since the very first SD-WAN services we offered to our clients, back in 2015, 2016. And there's, I think, still a lot of misunderstanding in the industry around what this really means. And what we've used it for is really allowing the clients to be able to interact with us in a way that's more aligned with how their business wants to behave. So it's not a traditional outsourced agreement where the outsourced party is doing all of the work and everything is locked down and you can just get bare minimum levels of visibility. But it's also not a free-for-all. It's not like a completely open environment where the client can make all the changes and everything can fall apart pretty quickly and there's no accountability. So I think in what we've done there around co-management, we've done a good job overall of defining what that looks like. Here's what the client can do. Here's what we can do. Here is training material that we've produced to be able to enable the client teams to be self-sufficient for a bunch of the different change types and so on. And I think as a combination, if I combine that with the telco independent piece, we have developed a relatively unique set of capabilities there that we can use as the definition of that service, and that forms the basis of the operating model we provide.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it comes back, as you say, you need some structure. Co-managed can't mean whatever, one client would like it to mean and something different for the next. You need some structure, and that comes back to that service lifecycle concept that we've always had embedded in our thinking, and the respect that, different clients are at different stages, different phases of that life cycle. They might be in the assess phase, they might be in the deploy phase, they might be in the manage phase, they might have even moved through all the way to the optimize phase. And that's sort of not only the mindset that we've always had to be able to sort of treat the different clients where they need to be treated differently, but still have a one overarching structure to be able to execute with consistency and quality. And I think that sort of mapped where the market sort of moved as well. So in that sort of 2014, 15, 16, it was really a knowledge-based challenge in the market. And that's really when we did most of the assessment type work, as we sort of said, those consulting professional services scopes to sort of help clients understand the differences between the vendor options and a raft of other considerations, even to get past go. Then I think in 2017, 18, it started to move more out of the knowledge-based challenge into an execution-based challenge. So by that, I mean, clients already came to the table with much better understanding of the leading vendors and what business case and use cases they wanted to achieve, but they really needed to help to deploy it in the field and to move past that high-level understanding into a detailed way of actually deploying it and living it. So really it became an execution-based challenge. And again, we were sort of right at the, at the vanguard of that movement with a wonderful global team. And then now I think it's really moved into an optimization challenge. So a lot of clients have even done their initial testing, maybe even had their first generation of the SD-WAN. And really they're now sort of moved past not just how do I manage this network day to day, but how do I optimize it? How do I get it more integrated into other security and cloud services, in a true multi-cloud way? How do I, make sure I've got the very best features that are available in all of the industry for the SD-WAN that I've deployed? What's the model, as you say, the telco provided SD-WAN is one valid route that a lot of the market will gravitate to, and we think that's great. The more people are sort of familiar with the technology, the better. But we went down the telco independent model, and we think that there's so much benefit to be derived, particularly for companies that have got a broad geographic spread of sites. So really, with that assess, deploy, manage, optimize set of phases, we started to really map out modules and take quite a modular approach for each of those, so that we had deployment service modules specifically defined. And one client may choose to have us do the whole lot, and that was fine if that's what they wanted and needed. And some clients would need a level of enablement, a level of design and architecture work, a level of hand-holding for the first critical deployments and get those templates and profiles right. But then they would be free and able to do more deployment activities once they were up and running. So they would only take some service modules. And then in the management phase, the same thing, where some clients would want us to do it end to end. And again, that's fine if that's what they really want. But if they've already got, an amount of internal expertise and they've got an amount of control that they would like to keep themselves, then they can choose a particular set of our defined service modules in that management phase that's right for them. So really that modular phase, that modular approach is really pivotal to actually making co-managed, not just a cliche that's bandied around quite a bit by some vendors, but then you try and dig into, okay, so how do I work that day to day? If I want to make this change, who's got responsibility now? Or can I see all of those things in the, the vendor orchestrator, or are some of them hidden away from me? So these are all the detailed questions that we've been helping clients with since 2014.
Yeah, that's true. Right since the very beginning. And what I think we've been able to do really effectively with that modular approach is that it's been a big factor in being able to work with clients across different geographies where the norms maybe are slightly different. So working with clients in Asia Pacific, for example, that might have more of an expectation around a fully managed service, or clients in Europe that have a similar expectation, versus clients in North America where there's a lot more of a do-it-yourself mentality and maybe even lower expectations as to what they can get in the market. So they kind of start the conversation assuming they'll own more of those components themselves. So I think having that flexibility is really a key factor in being able to service clients in those markets quite well. And even more recently, as we start working with larger global clients as well, we've even seen that within some of the individual clients, different subgroups within the client want to operate in slightly different ways. And I think that'll be a really difficult thing to do effectively if we didn't have that modular approach. So it's definitely proving its worth, I think, in a lot of these deployments that we're involved in, isn't it?
Absolutely, and the devil's in the detail, and anyone who's got responsibility for a broad, wide area network, understands that the thousands of users on the end of that, who are doing critical applications, working with critical applications every day, critical workflows to the business. Those workflows in COVID have been tested, even more. So it's really important. It's a business critical service that we provide, and we've again, really have to pay tribute to the wonderful team that we've built up across many countries and continents. They're a very skilled team, very passionate team. So it's always a case of mapping not just the technology knowledge and the structure, as we say, for that modular service lifecycle approach, but always having that wonderful group of experts available, playing various different roles operationally, technically, and commercially for our clients.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more with that, definitely. And wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that team. So yeah, it makes a huge difference. I think the other technology pillar, if you like, around what we're involved in today is really around this whole concept of cloud networking and multi-cloud. And I know from what I've seen over the last year with a lot of the changing work patterns due to COVID and so on, that has really started to become, I would say, elevated into the mainstream of a lot of these enterprise conversations, where it wasn't really given a whole lot of consideration in the past around how you connect these different workloads together, how you do it effectively, how you do it securely. But as we've seen enterprises really step up the pace in terms of taking services and infrastructure and workloads out of their on-premises data centers, we've seen a really big shift towards putting those in the cloud. And then all of a sudden that becomes a cloud networking conversation around, well, how are we going to join these together? How do we deliver a level of assurance across the top of it and deliver the right level of visibility back to the business and so on? So I think it's a good example, and I don't want to delve too much into the technology side of it, but I think it's a good example of how we can take some of the Coevolve philosophy and approach around evolving these networks and requirements over time and applying them to a slightly different technology, or in the end, maybe a very different technology. And cloud networking for us has kind of followed that trajectory. It's kind of gone from being a node that's sitting off the edge of the network that's connected via a VPN tunnel and a handful of workloads might live in there, to, in many of our clients, that's now the center of the network, and the connectivity in and out of those cloud environments and between those cloud environments now dominates what that enterprise does, because that's where their business now resides and their workloads now reside. So I think demonstrating that we can follow the progression of these enterprise requirements, and at each stage along that progression find workable solutions for them, and not just be immersed in the technology, but have a level of awareness around how we can use that technology and apply it back into the client's business. That's been, I think, a really good validation of a lot of the things that we've said for a long time that we can help with, but there's a really good practical example of a technology that we've kind of watched becoming mainstream over the last year or two.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's been our history all the way along, hasn't it? Where we're not here to flog the latest acronym and pick up on the sort of trendy term in the industry. As we said, we were working on SD-WAN before Andrew Lerner and Gartner and the like coined that as a phrase in mid 2014. We were working with Cato, as an amazing technology provider with integrated SD-WAN and security from 2017, 2018, again, before SASE became another industry term, which I think some people are still scratching their head about, how that's the best acronym to be using. But the key point is, where our conversations with our clients are never about the latest tech acronym. They're actually about, as you say, you've moved so many workloads to the cloud. You've got different developers requiring different things, and sometimes in AWS, sometimes in Azure, or you're sort of standardized on Google or whatever it may be. But then sure enough, the business goes and makes an acquisition, and lo and behold, that acquired company's got another way of working that you've got to integrate into this and make this a seamless WAN experience for your end users again. So that's where, absolutely, we've been at the forefront of these technology changes. But, never just sort of for the sake of picking up on the latest acronym or reading a report to sort of go, oh, that's where we think there's business to be made in the market. It's all based off, what we're seeing practically, talking to those manufacturing clients, those engineering construction clients, those professional services clients. So it's really, those sorts of relationships with, someone like a Probe, a business process outsource organisation, now about 12,000 employees. And we've got a wonderful co-managed relationship with their team there that's been able to keep up with their frenetic growth as a business and these technology changes, as you say, Ciaran. So it's exciting. That's what we love doing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think looking forward to the future, then I think we can really see how you can take some of the concepts and the foundations that we've built already and apply those to whatever these next technologies look like, and help solve the next round of challenges for our enterprise clients. And I think that wouldn't be very easy to do if we hadn't built that foundation successfully already. And I think that's going to be a key factor going forward. And I think looking at I'd be keen to get your thoughts on this as well, but from a technology perspective and from a service offering perspective, I think the exciting things that I see on the horizon, I think obviously fleshing out and further developing our multi-cloud capabilities and really working with the innovator clients that we've got in that space to understand what does a really valuable managed service across the top of that look like, and where are the gaps today in the market, and really making sure that we've got that as mature as we want it to be. That's one area that I'm definitely looking forward to as a challenge going forward. The other is maybe a slightly different angle, which is going deeper into some of the industry verticals that we've worked with today. So if we look at our clients today in the manufacturing and industry space, in civil engineering, construction, and so on, these are clients that are taking some interesting technologies, particularly in the IoT space and in the machinery that needs to have connectivity, or the devices in a connected building that need to have reliable connectivity. And how do you handle that data effectively? How do you process it? How do you transmit it in and out of cloud environments to process it, and so on? I think that's going to be an interesting challenge for us as well, around defining the next set of services that are really valuable to those businesses. So not just looking at it from a traditional network service provider model, but actually delving down into that next level of detail for some of these industries where they demand more than that. If they're trying to combine their operational technology and their IT environments, well, what does that mean in practice? How do you segment the traffic? How do you give the right SLAs? How do you give the right visibility, and so on? I think that's going to be an area that we can add a lot of value in, and I think it again differentiates a lot of what we do from the more traditional competitors in the industry. But yeah, keen to get your thoughts as well on what next for us, and where do you see us going next?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The same modus operandi of a really expert and passionate team, just sort of working through these issues, dissecting them side by side with the client. I think of Handsome Technologies, a really amazing growth software business selling software services to utilities like telcos and power companies and the like. Really fascinating global business, probably about 6 continents, I'm guessing, that they've got business operations in. And if I think about the wonderful relationship and the conversations our team have with them, it spans a whole raft of joint vendor technologies that we work on together. There's VMware VeloCloud, there's Dell, there's Zscaler or Zscaler for the Aussie audience, there's Azure, there's Equinix, and these are all partnerships that we have, again, in that ecosystem sort of approach that we have, that need to all come together. And, clients don't just want a point solution and have one vendor sort of just very narrowly define, well, this is the extent of my product, buy that, and then I'm out of here. They want help with clients want help with partners really to sort of come up with an end-to-end approach there and think, not just how do I deploy it, but how do I live it? What's the operating model 24/7, months down the track, when you need to support that critical environment down the track. So, so we're just so excited about that technology. And if I think about the learning opportunities for our team, we've invested so much into that wonderful team to give them that exposure. It's not like we can send them off to a traditional course for the technology that's been, applicable for the last 10 years, and they can sit in the classroom and do a CCIE or whatever it might be. But, the technology team that you've built up, Ciaran, are just sort of sharing and teasing open those technologies together, along, again, with really great vendor relationships in those companies and others. That really sort of make it all come together. So that's the bit we love. And, we don't expect the technology to stand still. Like we say, that's built into the name of the business, let alone our methodology. Sure. And that's the technology side, but the client needs that service delivery experience, wherever they are in that service lifecycle, assess, deploy, manage, optimize. So what we're really excited about as well is not just the increasing number of vendors in that integrated solution, but the service wrap, the managed service wrap, the co-managed services that we add to that. And we've got a real vision of making those smart services. And some of that dates back to 2016 when, you, Ciaran, sort of really started with the team maximising the use of the APIs with the technology vendors like VeloCloud and others. And so sort of really, there's a lot of industry terms like AI ops and other sorts of terms, essentially bringing in more machine learning and other technology into the mix. But really, it's that smart services vision. So how do we continue to make that service experience for our clients richer and more meaningful and more efficient and more informed? So I think, that's what I'm really excited about as well, evolving that co-managed service wrap, really making the most of automation, the use of APIs, ML, etc. in what we label smart services.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, the amount of promise and potential in that whole space is just immense. And I think it comes back in many ways to the team we're building. And we recognized a few years ago that we really needed to start building in some of that development type mindset into new hires as we joined the team, so that we could bring a level of not just the skill set, but just the way of thinking even around how can you automate and script aspects of these networks that were very manual and time consuming in the past. And I think as we've grown the team, we've sort of kept a lookout for bringing in bits of that skill set into the mix as well. And I think that's had a really important role in being able to deliver some of the early parts of these smart services. But that's, I think, one of the big areas of focus for us in 2021 is more industrializing some of these offerings and taking them from being like just smart scripts that can be run on an ad hoc basis and turning them into these smart services that can run in the background and provide all of this additional value to the clients. And it's a constant balancing act and juggling act almost, because the functionality that's being built into a lot of the products and on the vendor side that we're working with is maturing, and they're looking at extra types of reports and automations and so on. But what's not there is the really well established glue between these different systems. And what most of our clients want is that end-to-end picture. They want somebody who can oversee all of the different components, whether it's their SD-WAN, whether it's the cloud security services, whether it's co-location and the network backbone components and so on. All of these different pieces, there's programmable interfaces into all of them at the moment, and we're really stepping up the pace in terms of using those effectively to get end-to-end visibility, to do provisioning, to do troubleshooting, diagnostics and so on. So I think the potential there to really evolve those managed services in this smart services concept is a really interesting aspect of what we're going to do next. And yeah, it's one I hope we can talk a lot more about in a subsequent episode as well.
Yeah, no, that'd be a really great one to break open. As we say, it's been part of our modus operandi in some ways for a long time, but there's a whole next level that we're planning on, and you and Luke and Rodney and the rest of the team are already working on. We're really excited to just make that a more rich and informed and responsive service for our clients, along with the wonderful team that we've got doing the service modules that we've already got today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And no, I think that's it's a really good summary. I think that's probably a good place to wrap things up for today. And yeah, stay tuned for more in-depth discussion on some of these topics in some subsequent episodes. But yeah, for now, thanks Tim for joining me on this today. And this is hopefully the first of many of these.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if it's your podcast etiquette to be having your guests drink coffee while they talk, but we wouldn't be able to get these meetings going as effectively without a bit of caffeine. So thanks for the time today, mate. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope it's cool to get that next level of insight into who Coevolve are.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think coffee is an essential part of a global team like ours. So we won't be giving up on that anytime soon. All right. Thanks again, everybody. And thank you for joining us. And we'll be in touch soon. Thank you.